I used to love Black Friday. The chaos, the thrill of the hunt, the feeling that you were somehow winning just by snatching up that last discounted gadget before someone else could. Every year, I'd gear up for it, combing through ads, making lists, and mapping out my route. It was a tradition, one that I relished, even as people around me grew cynical about the commercialism of it all. This year was supposed to be no different, except for one thing, the TV. I'd had my eye on it for months. A 75-inch OLED beauty, with more features than I could pronounce, let alone need. It was the crown jewel of Black Friday deals at a nearby megastore, and I was determined to make it mine. The price was absurdly low, an almost laughable discount. But there was a catch. The store only had 5 in stock. I could feel it stirring inside me as I planned, a mix of excitement and something darker. Desire. Obsession. A greedy little whisper that told me I deserved that TV, no matter what. By the time Thanksgiving dinner rolled around, I wasn't even pretending to care about the food or family. All I could think about was getting to that store first, staking my claim. I left the table early, ignoring the disapproving looks, and parked myself in front of the store hours before it opened. The parking lot was already a zoo. Cars were packed into every available space, headlights cutting through the early winter fog. People stood huddled in groups, bundled against the biting cold, their breath rising in clouds as they chattered about doorbuster deals. But I wasn't here to chat. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to win. I positioned myself near the front of the line, my body braced against the icy wind. Time crawled by, each minute feeling like an eternity, but eventually the doors opened. That's when things started to get weird. The initial rush was predictable. A mob of shoppers surged forward, spilling into the store like water through a broken dam. I was swept up in it, jostled and elbowed, but I didn't care. My eyes were locked on the prize. I knew where the TVs were, and I sprinted toward the electronics section, weaving through aisles, dodging shopping carts, my heart pounding like a war drum. But something felt off. The store was massive, far bigger than it had seemed from the outside. The aisles stretched endlessly in every direction, their fluorescent lights casting a harsh, unnatural glow. Shelves were packed with products, but they were strangely generic, rows upon rows of unmarked boxes, their contents a mystery. At first, I told myself it was just the adrenaline, the chaos of Black Friday playing tricks on my mind. But as I pushed deeper into the store, the noise of the crowd faded, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence. And then I saw her. She was standing at the end of the aisle, a pale, thin woman in a red store uniform. Her name tag said, Claire, but there was something wrong with her face. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too still, like a mannequin come to life. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, her voice high and artificial, like a recording. "I'm looking for the TVs," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her head tilted slightly, her smile never wavering. "They're just ahead. Down the next aisle." I nodded and hurried past her, but I couldn't shake the feeling of her gaze lingering on me, even after I turned the corner. The TVs weren't there. Instead, I found more unmarked shelves, their contents growing stranger the farther I went, empty picture frames, rusted tools, dolls with missing eyes. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer, and the aisles seemed to stretch longer and longer, bending in unnatural ways. Panic started to creep in. I turned back, but the path I'd come from was gone, replaced by another endless aisle of faceless products. I tried retracing my steps, but no matter which way I went, I couldn't find the entrance, or even another shopper. It was as if I'd been swallowed by the store itself. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. Time had lost all meaning in that place. I wandered aimlessly, calling out for help, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. My phone was useless, no signal, no time, just the mocking glow of the home screen. And then I saw her again. Claire. She was standing at the end of the aisle, just as before, her smile as wide and unnatural as ever. "You seem lost," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. "I need to get out of here," I said, my voice cracking. Where's the exit? Her head tilted again, her glassy eyes fixed on me. Why would you want to leave? Everything you've ever wanted is right here. I shook my head, backing away. No. This isn't right. This isn't real. Her smile faltered for the first time, twisting into something far darker. You came for something, didn't you? Something you couldn't live without. I don't care anymore, I stammered. Just let me out. Her laugh was sharp, hollow, and it echoed down the endless aisles like a bell tolling in a cavern. But you do care, she said, stepping closer. You've always cared. You wanted more and more and more. And now, you're here. I turned and ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The aisles twisted around me, bending into impossible shapes, closing in like walls. The shelves loomed taller, their faceless products staring down at me like silent judges. And then I saw it. The TV. It stood at the end of the aisle, glowing faintly, impossibly perfect. Its screen flickered with static, but as I approached, the static shifted, forming images. Images of me. Me, shoving past people in the crowd. Me, grabbing the last of something before someone else could. Me, clutching my shopping cart like a lifeline, my face twisted with greed and desperation. The TV whispered to me, its voice soft and sweet, like a lullaby. Take it. It's yours. My hand reached out, trembling. I don't remember reaching for the TV, but I must have, because suddenly my fingers brushed the screen. The static felt alive, crackling against my skin like it was breathing. The images of me flickered and warped, melting into something worse, shadows and shapes, faces I didn't recognize. All of them were twisted with longing, rage, and fear. And then the screen went black. Behind me, the voice returned. You've made your choice. I spun around, but Claire wasn't there. The aisle was empty, stretching endlessly in both directions. The air felt heavier, thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Then the TV whispered again. Turn around. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to run. But there was nowhere to go. Slowly, I turned back to the TV. The screen flickered to life, showing a new image, me, standing in that very aisle, staring at the TV. Except it wasn't me. Not exactly. The figure on the screen was gaunt and pale, its eyes hollow and sunken. It wore my clothes, but they were tattered, filthy, as if it had been wandering for years. Its lips moved, and though I couldn't hear the words, I knew what it was saying. Help me! The screen went dark again, and I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder, flickering like they were about to die. The aisles around me seemed to stretch and twist, the shelves bending into impossible angles. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, flitting between the shelves. They were quick, almost too quick to see, but I could feel them watching me. Whispering. Mocking. I broke into a run, my footsteps echoing loudly in the unnatural silence. The products on the shelves became more bizarre the farther I went, jars of teeth, clocks with no hands, shoes filled with dirt. The whispers grew louder, the shadows closer, until I could feel them brushing against my skin. And then I heard Claire's voice again. You wanted more. You took more. And now you belong here. I skidded to a stop, turning wildly, but there was no sign of her, just the shadows, circling like vultures. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, my thoughts racing. No, I said aloud, my voice trembling. This isn't real. It's just a dream. But the shadows laughed, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the aisles. One of them stepped forward, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Its face, if you could call it that, was featureless, except for its eyes, two pinpricks of light, burning with an unnatural fire. Reality is what you make it, it hissed. And this is what you've made. I stumbled backward, bumping into a shelf. Boxes tumbled to the floor, spilling their contents, empty cans, cracked mirrors, fragments of photographs. One of the mirrors caught my reflection, and I froze. The person staring back at me wasn't me. Not anymore. My face was pale, my eyes sunken and hollow. My clothes hung off me like rags, my skin stretched thin over sharp bones. I looked like the figure from the TV, like I'd been wandering this place for years. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't me. The shadow stepped closer, its voice dripping with malice. It will be. I ran again, blindly this time, my legs screaming in protest. The aisles seemed to shift and warp as I moved, the shelves rising and falling like waves. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, some of them popping and plunging sections of the store into darkness. I don't know how long I ran, minutes, hours, days. Time didn't exist in that place. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more insistent. The shadows closed in, their laughter ringing in my ears. And then I saw it, a door. It stood at the end of the aisle, a simple, unmarked door with a brass handle. It looked completely out of place among the towering shelves and endless aisles, but I didn't care. It was the first sign of an escape I'd seen since entering this nightmare. I sprinted toward it, my lungs burning, my legs threatening to give out. The shadows screamed behind me, their whispers turning to shrieks, but I didn't look back. I reached the door and yanked it open, throwing myself through without a second thought. For a moment, there was silence. I found myself standing in a vast, empty space, the ground beneath me smooth and white, like polished stone. The air was still and cold, and there was no sign of the store or the shadows. Relief washed over me, until I saw the figure. It was standing in the distance, facing away from me. It was tall and thin, draped in tattered black fabric that shifted as if caught in a breeze I couldn't feel. In its hand was the bell. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice small and trembling. The figure turned slowly, its face hidden beneath the hood. When it spoke, its voice was like the crackle of a dying fire. "This is the price of greed. The endless aisle. The hunger that can never be sated." I took a step back, but the ground beneath me shifted. The polished stone cracked and fell away, revealing rows of shelves stretching endlessly in every direction. "No," I whispered. "I don't belong here." "I didn't mean." The figure raised the bell, and its toll filled the air, a sound that vibrated through my very soul. "You chose this," it said. "And now you will wander, as all who came before you." The ground gave way completely, and I fell. I woke up back in the store, surrounded by endless aisles and flickering lights. The shadows were gone, the whispers silent. But the bell remained, sitting on a shelf beside me, its runes faintly glowing. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and stared into its tarnished surface. My reflection stared back, not the man I was, but the hollow, broken version I'd seen before. And then I heard Claire's voice, soft and distant. "Welcome back. I'm still here, wandering the aisles, searching for an exit I know I'll never find. The shelves stretch on forever, their faceless products mocking me. The shadows watch from the edges, waiting for me to fall apart completely. Black Friday was supposed to be about finding a deal, about winning. But I lost. And now I'll wander the endless aisle forever." The last shopper Black Friday had always been my favorite day of the year. There's something intoxicating about the rush, the crowds, the thrill of hunting for deals like some modern-day scavenger. This year, though, things felt different. Maybe it was because I was coming off a bad breakup, or maybe it was the stress of work piling up. But I wasn't just looking for deals, I was looking for distraction. Something to drown out the noise in my head. When I saw the ad for the mall's Midnight Madness event, promising discounts that would make all your dreams come true, I didn't think twice. I arrived at Ridgeway Mall at 11:45 p.m., ready to dive into the chaos. The parking lot was a sea of brake lights and honking horns, the faint glow of the mall's marquee cutting through the winter fog. People were already pushing through the main entrance, their faces lit with a mix of excitement and desperation. I pushed my way inside, clutching my list. A new gaming console for my nephew, clothes for my sister, a new tablet for work, all practical purchases, I told myself. But deep down, I wasn't here for practicality. I was here to forget. The mall was a madhouse. The central atrium was packed shoulder to shoulder, shoppers jostling and shouting as they darted between stores. Giant banners hung from the ceiling, proclaiming discounts so steep they felt like a dare. The air buzzed with energy, the bright fluorescents casting harsh shadows on the walls. Christmas decorations were everywhere, fake snow, glittering ornaments, a massive tree in the center of the food court. The music over the loudspeakers was cheerful and loud, but it felt grating, almost mocking. I started at the electronics store. The line stretched out the door and snaked through the mall, a parade of impatient shoppers clutching consoles, laptops, and other tech treasures. I fought my way inside, the noise of the crowd pounding in my ears. By the time I got what I needed, the clock had ticked past 1:30 a.m. My arms were full of bags, my energy fading, but I wasn't ready to stop. I needed more things, more distractions, more noise to drown out the ache in my chest. The deeper I went into the mall, the stranger it felt. The main concourse was alive with activity, but the farther I ventured, the quieter it became. Stores farther down the halls were less crowded, their lights dimmer. Some were completely empty, their gates pulled halfway down, the darkness inside them unnerving. I turned a corner, and it was like stepping into another world. The crowds were gone. The music had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The lights above me buzzed faintly, their glow flickering unevenly. I glanced at my watch, 3:15 a.m. The mall wasn't set to close until 5, but it felt like I'd overstayed my welcome. As I walked, I noticed something strange. The mirrors in the store windows seemed off, their reflections warped in ways I couldn't quite explain. When I passed the clothing store, I froze. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, but it wasn't right. I was there, holding my bags, but I wasn't moving. My reflection stood still, watching me with wide, unblinking eyes. I turned away, my heart racing, and kept walking. The farther I went, the more unsettling it became. The stores were all closed now, their gates locked, their interiors dark. The decorations seemed to sag, the fake snow dirty and clumped, the ornaments cracked and tarnished. I tried to head back toward the main atrium, but no matter which way I turned, the halls stretched endlessly before me. The signs above the stores blurred, their letters twisting into nonsense. And then I heard it. Footsteps. At first I thought it was just another shopper, a straggler like me. But when I turned, the hallway was empty. The footsteps came again, louder this time, echoing off the walls. They were uneven, shuffling, like whoever, or whatever, was following me wasn't walking right. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I quickened my pace, my breath coming in short gasps. The footsteps kept pace with me, always just out of sight. I ducked into a side hallway, clutching my bags like a lifeline. The hallway was lined with mirrors, floor to ceiling, their surfaces covered in a thin layer of grime. My reflection stared back at me from every angle, dozens of me, each one looking more distorted than the last. I glanced behind me, expecting to see someone, or something, but the hall was empty. When I looked back at the mirrors, my stomach dropped. The reflections weren't following me anymore. In the mirrors, I stood frozen in place, my face twisted in fear. But in reality, I was still moving, still clutching my bags, still trying to escape. The reflections turned their heads, one by one, until they were all looking at me. And then they smiled. Panic took over. I dropped my bags and ran, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the silence of them all. The mirrors stretched on forever, their surfaces rippling as if the glass were water. Finally, I stumbled into another hallway, this one dark and silent. The mirrors were gone, replaced by rows of locked doors. At the end of the hall was an elevator, its doors slightly ajar. A soft light spilled out, casting long shadows on the floor. I hesitated. Everything about it felt wrong, but I didn't have a choice. The footsteps were behind me now, closer than ever, accompanied by a faint, raspy breathing. The elevator chimed softly, its doors sliding open. I stepped inside. The elevator doors slid shut with a groan, and I was swallowed by silence. The interior was dimly lit, the walls covered in mirrored panels that reflected me from every angle. The air was stifling, heavy with the smell of old metal and mildew. I hit the button for the first floor, but the elevator didn't move. The panel blinked once, and all the buttons lit up at once, as though mocking my attempt to escape. "Come on," I muttered, pressing the buttons again. The elevator jolted, and for a moment I thought it was working. But instead of descending, it began to rise. I clutched the railing as the elevator climbed higher and higher, the numbers on the display ticking up far past what the mall should have allowed. When it reached the 50th floor, the display flickered and went blank. The elevator stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lights flickered, and the mirrors came to life. At first, I thought they were just reflecting me, but the images weren't right. My reflections didn't match my movements. They stared back at me with hollow eyes, their expressions twisted into cruel smirks. One of them tilted its head, and the rest followed, moving in perfect unison. "Why are you running?" one of them asked, its voice low and distorted. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the wall. "What do you want?" The reflections didn't answer. Instead, they began to laugh, a sound that echoed around me, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. The elevator doors creaked open, and the laughter stopped abruptly. Beyond the threshold was a hallway, identical to the ones in the mall but impossibly long. The lights above flickered erratically, casting the space in a sickly, yellowish glow. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dust, undisturbed except for a single trail of footprints leading into the distance. I didn't want to go, but the elevator behind me groaned and began to hum, as if it were preparing to fall. I stepped out. The hallway stretched endlessly, the ceiling looming higher the farther I walked. The air grew colder, my breath visible in thin, trembling clouds. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint echo of my footsteps. Every so often, I passed doors, plain, unmarked, and locked. I tried a few, but none of them would budge. Then I saw the first shadow. It darted across the hallway ahead of me, quick and silent, disappearing behind one of the doors. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The shadows grew bolder the farther I went. They moved just at the edges of my vision, flickering across the walls and floor, their shapes humanoid but wrong. Eventually, the hallway opened into a massive atrium, eerily similar to the central plaza of the mall. A shattered fountain stood at the center, surrounded by empty storefronts. The decorations here were old and decayed, the garlands frayed and the fake snow tinged with brown. I moved toward the fountain, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. As I approached, I realized the fountain wasn't empty. It was filled with a dark, viscous liquid that shimmered like oil. Floating in the center was something that made my stomach drop, a shopping bag. It was mine. Before I could react, the shadows appeared again, this time stepping fully into the light. They were human-shaped but impossibly tall, their limbs too long and thin, their heads featureless except for deep-set hollows where eyes should have been. They moved slowly, deliberately, closing the circle around me. I backed away, my chest tight with fear. "Stay back," I whispered, though my voice shook. The shadows didn't speak. Instead, they raised their hands, long, bony fingers pointing at the fountain. "Take it," one of them rasped, its voice like dry leaves rustling. "I don't want it," I shouted. They stepped closer, their movements fluid and unnatural. "You took what wasn't yours," another shadow said. "Finish what you started." I turned to run, but the path behind me was gone, replaced by a wall of mirrors. My reflection stared back at me, its hollow eyes filled with malice. "You don't leave," the reflection said, its voice overlapping with the shadows. "You belong here now." I felt a hand, cold and impossibly strong, grip my shoulder. I screamed, struggling to pull away, but the shadows dragged me toward the fountain. The dark liquid rippled as I was forced closer, the smell of rot and decay overwhelming me. I fought, clawed, begged, but it didn't matter. The shadows were relentless. They pushed me to the edge of the fountain, their hollow faces inches from mine. "You wanted more," they whispered. Now you'll have it. With one final shove, they forced me into the fountain. The liquid was freezing, thick, and suffocating. I thrashed and screamed, but it filled my mouth and nose, pulling me deeper. As I sank, the world around me shifted. The atrium faded, replaced by endless aisles of shelves, each one stacked with products I didn't recognize. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, casting long, flickering shadows. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. The shadows surrounded me again, their whispers echoing in my ears. You're one of us now, they said. Another shadow in the aisle. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, months, years, it doesn't matter. The mall is empty, its halls stretching endlessly, the shelves always just out of reach. The mirrors show me what I've become, a shadow, featureless and hollow, doomed to wander forever. Every Black Friday, the mall comes alive again. I see the shoppers, hear their laughter, feel their desperation. I try to warn them, but they never see me. And when the lights go out, they join me. Another shadow. Another prisoner of the mall. Black Friday had always been my favorite day of the year. There's something intoxicating about the idea of getting what you want, what you deserve, for a fraction of the price. For me, it wasn't just a shopping spree, it was a battlefield, a test of strategy and endurance. This year, I had a plan. I'd been saving for months, cutting corners where I could, all for the biggest tech haul of my life. I wanted it all, a 4K OLED TV, the latest gaming console, noise-canceling headphones, a state-of-the-art sound system. I didn't even need half of it. But I wanted it. The megamart across town was offering once-in-a-lifetime deals, and I was determined to clean them out. I arrived hours before the doors opened, armed with a thermos of coffee and a folding chair. The parking lot was already a zoo, tents, lines, and enough caffeine-fueled chatter to power a small city. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. The doors opened at midnight, and chaos erupted. Shoppers shoved and elbowed their way through the entrance, grabbing at anything within reach. I darted toward the electronics section, clutching my list like it was a map to buried treasure. The shelves were packed with shiny, new tech, boxes stacked to the ceiling, their slick packaging practically begging to be taken home. I grabbed everything I could, my cart overflowing within minutes. The adrenaline was addictive. The more I grabbed, the more I wanted. I didn't stop to think, didn't stop to care. When I finally reached the checkout, the cashier gave me a look, her lips curling into a faint, almost mocking smile. Big haul tonight, huh? She said, scanning item after item. You have no idea, I replied, grinning. But as she bagged my items, the smile on her face grew sharper, colder. You sure you can handle it all? I laughed nervously, brushing off the strange tone in her voice. That's why I came. I've been planning this for months. She handed me my receipt, her eyes glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. Enjoy it, she said. Every last bite. I frowned but didn't reply. Something about her smile stuck with me as I pushed my cart toward the exit. That's when it happened. The world around me shifted. One moment, I was rolling my cart through the sliding doors. The next, I was standing in an empty, pitch-black space. The air was heavy, the silence deafening, and my cart, the precious treasure I'd fought so hard to claim, was gone. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing into the void. No response. Then, a sound soft at first, but growing louder. The steady, rhythmic click of heels on a hard floor. A figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, gaunt man in a suit that seemed to shimmer unnaturally. His face was sharp, almost mechanical, his smile too wide, his eyes glowing faintly like LED lights. Congratulations, he said, his voice smooth and hollow. You've won. Won what? I asked, my voice trembling. He gestured to the empty space around us, his movements unnaturally fluid. You wanted it all, didn't you? The gadgets, the tech, the toys. So much desire, so much hunger. I took a step back. I don't understand. Where am I? What's going on? His smile widened. "You've been chosen for the feast." Before I could reply, the darkness around us shifted, transforming into a grotesque banquet hall. The walls were lined with shelves of tech, TVs, computers, phones, all stacked haphazardly like trophies. The long table in the center of the room was covered in wires, circuit boards, and sleek black devices, their surfaces glinting like polished silverware. The man gestured to an empty chair at the head of the table. "Sit," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I hesitated, but the ground beneath me seemed to ripple, pulling me toward the chair. I sat down, my hands gripping the arms of the chair tightly. "You wanted it all," he said, stepping closer. "Now you'll have it. Every last bit." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. "I don't want this. I just wanted more," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You wanted more. And now you'll consume it." The table groaned, shifting as the tech seemed to come alive. The devices buzzed faintly, their screens flickering with static. Wires snaked across the table, curling toward me like living things. The man placed a sleek tablet in front of me, its screen glowing faintly. "Eat," he commanded. I stared at him, horrified. "You're insane." "I can't." The tablet buzzed, its surface cracking open to reveal a pulsing, fleshy interior. The smell of burnt plastic and something sickly sweet filled the air, making me gag. The man leaned closer, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Eat," he repeated, his voice like steel. The wires around me tightened, wrapping around my arms and legs, forcing me closer to the table. The tablet quivered, its insides oozing and bubbling. "No!" I screamed, thrashing against the wires. But it was no use. The man's smile grew impossibly wide. "You wanted to devour the world," he said. "Now, the world will devour you." The wires coiled tighter, constricting my arms and legs until I could barely move. My head was forced forward, the tablet's glowing, fleshy surface inches from my face. It pulsed and twitched, radiating heat and the acrid stench of burning plastic. "I don't want this," I screamed, struggling against the metallic tendrils. "Please, let me go." The man in the shimmering suit tilted his head, his LED-like eyes flickering in the dim light. "But you do," he said. "You've always wanted more, more than you need, more than you deserve. This is what greed tastes like." He reached out and pressed my face into the tablet. The surface yielded like gelatin, warm and wet, and I gagged as a bitter, electric tang filled my mouth. I tried to spit it out, but the wires around my jaw tightened, forcing me to swallow. The moment it slid down my throat, I felt it, a searing, unnatural heat spreading through my chest, my veins. My head spun as the man placed another device in front of me, this one a smartphone, its screen flickering with static. "Eat," he commanded again. "No!" I choked out, but the wires didn't care. They twisted around my wrists and shoved the phone into my mouth. It cracked and splintered as my teeth sank into the glass, shards cutting into my gums. The taste was worse this time, metallic, bitter, and somehow alive. With every bite, my body changed. It started with my fingers. The skin hardened, turning glossy and cold, the joints stiffening as they fused into sleek, black plastic. My reflection in the polished screen of a nearby monitor showed my face, twisted in pain, my eyes flickering with the same static that danced across the devices on the table. "You're becoming what you've always wanted," the man said, his voice calm, almost soothing. "Useful. Desirable. A part of the system." "No," I gasped, the wires around my chest tightening, my voice crackling like distorted audio. "This isn't real." But it was. I felt my arms stiffen, the muscles replaced by cables and circuits. My torso grew heavier, the weight of machinery pressing down on me. My vision blurred as my eyes flickered, the world around me shifting into harsh digital clarity. Time became meaningless. The man fed me device after device, laptops, headphones, cameras, all of them dissolving into my body, consuming me as much as I consumed them. The pain was endless. Every bite felt like a live wire snaking through my insides, every swallow like a knife twisting in my stomach. Eventually, the room faded, replaced by darkness. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the banquet hall anymore. I was in a box. The walls were smooth and black, pressing in on me from all sides. A faint hum filled the air, accompanied by distant, muffled voices. It took me a moment to realize where I was. I wasn't in a box. I was the box. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was gone, replaced by a faint mechanical whirring. I felt cold, heavy, and utterly immobile. The voices grew louder, and then the world around me shifted. I was being lifted, carried. The muffled voices became clearer, snippets of conversation filtering through the walls of the box. "Man, this TV is a steal," someone said. "Yeah, it's top of the line," another voice replied. I wanted to cry, to shout, to beg them to stop, but all I could do was listen as I was carried away, my prison rattling softly with each step. The next year passed in fragments. I spent most of it in darkness, sitting in someone's living room, my screen flickering to life whenever they turned me on. I couldn't see them directly, but I could feel them, watching me, laughing, shouting. Every program they played, every movie, every game, it all burned through me like fire. I felt the static ripple through my mind, the sounds pounding in my ears like a cruel mockery of life. I wasn't a person anymore. I was an appliance. And then, one day, the voices returned. Black Friday. The box closed around me again, and I was carried back to the store, shoved onto a shelf with dozens of other TVs. I couldn't see them, but I could feel their pain, the flickering, distorted minds trapped within their screens. The hours stretched endlessly, and then the doors opened. The chaos returned, shoppers flooding the store, their greedy hands grabbing at everything in sight. I prayed, if I could still pray, that no one would take me. That I'd be left here, forgotten. But then I heard it. "This one looks good," a voice said. Before I could brace myself, I was lifted off the shelf, carried away again. I spent another year in another house, my screen glowing with movies and games, my mind screaming silently. And every Black Friday, I'm returned to the store, sold to someone new. I don't know how many years it's been. I've lost count. All I know is that I'll never escape. I'll spend eternity as a prisoner of my own greed, passed from one owner to the next, my voice lost in the static. Forever.